Does it hurt every single time you take a step? The man in the gray hoodie asked as he set his items on Rosa's checkout belt. The beeps of the scanner, the hum of the air vents, and the chatter of the busy price town in Houston faded for a second, and all she heard was that one question. Rosa forced the same smile she gave every customer, the one that did not touch the tight pain in her dark eyes, and she tried to laugh it off. "That's a strange way to say hello," she said, sliding a carton of milk over the scanner and reaching for the next item, her back stiff as her right leg dragged just a little. He did not look away like most people did when they noticed her limp. He watched her, his brow pulled in with real worry, not pity. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, his voice low and almost shy. I saw you walking from the soda aisle. It looked like you were walking on broken glass or something. I didn't mean to be rude." Rosa's hand paused on a bag of oranges, the plastic cool under her fingers, and she felt heat rush into her face, that old mix of shame and anger. The feeling of being a broken thing in a world that wants everything fast and smooth and easy. "I'm fine," she said, the lie sharp on her tongue as she sent the oranges down the belt. "Been like this a long time. You get used to it." The man did not move his eyes. They were a clear hazel, with dark circles under them, like he had not slept much. "People don't get used to that kind of pain," he said quietly. "If you don't mind me asking, why do you walk like that?" For a heartbeat, Rosa thought about saying what she always said, some small joke about getting old, even though she was only 37, or a quick story about a little accident that she never explained. The easy lie waited on her tongue, the safe one that kept strangers from stepping into the hardest chapter of her life. But there was something in this man's face that stopped her, something she could not quite name, like he was not asking out of nosiness, but out of his own private hurt. His hoodie looked cheap, but the watch on his wrist was simple and costly, and his hands shook just a little as he reached for his wallet, like his nerves were made of thin glass. "Why do you even care?" she asked, hearing the sharp edge in her own voice, and wishing she could pull it back. But also not really sorry, because some days the pain burned hotter than her patience. He flinched at her tone, but did not step away, did not roll his eyes or mumble that it was none of his business. "My little brother used to walk like that after his accident," he said, his voice soft. He said people stared but no one ever asked, and it made him feel invisible. "I guess I don't want to pretend I don't see you hurting." Something inside Rosa loosened at those words, something that had been held tight for 15 long years. The line behind him was short. The other cashier had just opened another lane, so no one was rushing her, no one sighing or checking their phones in anger. She took a breath, felt the old ache shoot up from her hip into her spine, and turned her eyes back to his. "You really want to know?" she asked. "It's not a light story for a Friday afternoon in Presstown." He nodded, his throat moving as he swallowed. "Yeah," he said. "I do." Rosa looked past him for a moment, to the big front windows, where the Texas sun burned down on a parking lot full of cars and shopping carts. And she saw another night instead, long ago, a street wet with rain and blue lights flashing against the dark. She had not talked about that night with a stranger in years, not like this, not from the start. Usually she gave people little pieces, a joke here, a short fact there, never enough for them to see the whole picture of what one choice had done to her life. With a small sigh that felt like a door creaking open, she began. "I was 22, she said, her voice steady, though her fingers tightened on the scanner. I'd just finished a late shift at the diner over on Kirby Drive, back before they tore it down and put in that fancy coffee place. I was walking home because my old Honda had died that week, and I didn't have the money to fix it. It was almost midnight, and it had rained, the kind of thin, mean rain that makes the road shine but doesn't cool the air." He stood very still, the way people do when they realize the story is heavier than they thought. "I remember I was tired," she went on, seeing it all again, like it was playing on the security screens that hung over the store. I had my tip money in my pocket, and I was counting in my head if it was enough to pay the light bill and still buy my nursing books. I was about to start school at Houston Community College. It was this big dream, you know? First one in my family who is going to be a nurse. Her voice shook on the word was, but she pushed through. I was crossing by the old gas station on Birch and Tanglewood, under that streetlight that always flickered. I heard this engine rev loud, like someone was racing on a street that was too small for racing. I turned my head, and I saw these headlights come at me, fast, and I remember thinking, that car is not stopping. She could almost feel the hit again as she spoke, the way the world had gone white and then black, the way her body had flown and then slammed down, bones turning to broken glass inside her skin. They say, I screamed, she said, her eyes distant now, the beep of the scanner slowing. But I don't remember the sound. I remember cold, and this taste of metal in my mouth, and a voice somewhere far away shouting, don't move her, don't move her. When I woke up in the hospital, my mom was there, clutching my hand so hard her knuckles were white, and there were metal rods in both my legs and my hip. The doctor said my pelvis was shattered, like a dropped plate, and they had put me back together as best they could. He said I might walk again, but it would never be the same, and there would be pain every day for the rest of my life. Her throat burned, but she kept going, because once you opened this door, you either shut it fast or you let the whole storm blow through. I lay in that bed for months, she said. I missed the start of nursing school. My dad, he was a proud man, worked roofing his whole life. He took extra jobs to pay the bills, and his heart gave out the next year. The police told us the driver never stopped. They found broken glass from a red Mustang. That was it. Hit and run, they called it. No face, no name, just some ghost in a car who drove off and got to keep his life while mine. She let the word hang in the air, like a torn thing. The man in front of her looked pale now, his lips pressed tight, his hand still resting on the edge of the counter. So that's why I walk like I'm hurting, she finished quietly. Because someone decided they could drink and drive, and when they hit me, they left me in the street like trash. The doctors fixed what they could, but some things. She tapped her chest lightly. Some things you just learn to carry. The man did not speak at once, and Rosa realized she had stopped scanning his things. She picked up the pace, the rhythm of beep and slide and bag giving her something to do with her hands, while her heart beat hard in her ears. The air between them felt charged, like the air before a summer storm, thick and waiting. His breathing had changed. It was shallow now, ragged, and when she glanced up again she saw sweat on his forehead, even though the store was cool. His hazel eyes were wide, pupils blown dark, and his hands had curled into fists on the counter. Birch and Tanglewood, he whispered, as if testing the words, as if he had not said them out loud in a very long time. Red Mustang. Rosa frowned at him, confused by the way he repeated the details like someone reading their own name off a paper. Yeah, she said slowly. Back then, there was a gas station there, with a blue ice machine out front. It's a car wash now. The man sucked in a breath, a sharp, broken sound that made the woman in line behind him glance up from her phone. His face had gone the color of old paper. What day? He asked, his voice so thin she had to lean closer to hear it. Do you remember the date? She hesitated, but that night was burned into her, like a brand. She could never forget it. October 17th, she said. 15 years ago. A Saturday. The plastic bag in his hand slid from his fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. Oranges rolling out and bumping against his shoes, but he did not even look down. His eyes were locked on hers now, and there was horror there, something raw and naked that made the tiny hairs on her arms lift. For a second he seemed to sway, like his body could not decide whether to run or collapse, and then his knees buckled, and he dropped right there on the white tile in front of her register. The line gasped around them, someone letting out a sharp "Oh my God," as the man fell. But he did not brace himself, did not try to catch his fall. It was like his legs had given out from under a weight he had carried too long. He hit the floor hard and stayed there, on both knees, hands spread flat on the cold tile, his head bent. "Sir," Rosa said, her heart racing, every part of her body screaming to move to help him, but the old pain in her hip catching her still. The manager on duty, a thin woman named Kelsey, started hurrying over, already calling, "Is he okay? Do we need 911? But the man shook his head fast, like he wanted to stop the whole world right there. He lifted his face to Rosa, and she saw tears cutting lines down his cheeks. "October 17th, he said again, his voice raw now. "Red Mustang, Birch and Tanglewood." His hands were shaking so hard she could see it from where she stood. "I know that night," he whispered. "I know it because I was there." Rosa's body went cold all at once, like someone had poured ice water into her veins. "What are you talking about?" she asked, though part of her already knew, because the way he looked at her now was not the way a stranger looks at a story. It was the way a man looks at his own nightmare, finally given a face. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing, and he did not try to get up, did not wipe his tears, did not care that dozens of eyes were on him now. "It was me," he said, the 3 words shaking like they had fought him for years. "I was the driver. I hit you. I left you there. I'm the one who did this to you." The store sounds crashed back in on her all at once. The carts clanking, the low music from the speakers, the whisper rush of people making space around the scene like the widening circle around a dropped stone in water. For a heartbeat, Rosa could not breathe. It was as if the years between that night and this moment had folded up like a map, and she was both the girl in the street and the woman at the register, staring down at the man on his knees. Her first feeling was a wild, sharp wish to reach over the counter and shake him, to hit him, to scream until her voice broke. Her second feeling was fear, old and deep, the kind that makes your muscles lock, because the monster from the dark had stepped into the bright light of her everyday world. She gripped the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles hurt. "You think this is some kind of joke?" she said, her voice low and flat, because if she let it rise it would break. "Get up. Don't say things like that." But he just shook his head, tears falling faster. "I was 19, he said, words rushing out like a dam had broken. "I stole my dad's red Mustang to go to a party by the bayou. I drank too much. I thought I could still drive because everybody did. On the way home, I turned onto Birch to cut through, and I saw you in the crosswalk. I hit the brakes, but it was too late. I heard the sound when my car hit you. I'll never forget that sound." His shoulders shook, and he pressed his palms harder into the floor, as if he wanted it to swallow him whole. "I stopped," he went on. "For a second, I stopped. I saw someone running toward you, and I got scared. I thought, if I stay, my life is over. So I drove away. I told everyone I hit a trash can. I lied. I left you there. And I have seen your face in every nightmare since, even though I only saw you for 2 seconds under that flickering light." Her mind fought the words, but images rose anyway, unasked. The blur of a young man's face behind a windshield, the glint of a silver chain around his neck, the red of a car door half open before it slammed shut again, tires squealing on wet pavement. For years, that face in her memory had been half shadow, half guess, but now, here, on his knees, in front of her register, the pieces slid into place like a cruel puzzle. The jawline was older, the hair a little thinner, but the eyes were the same shape, only now full of some deep, raw sorrow. Her stomach twisted. She took a step back, her bad leg protesting, and bumped into the candy rack behind her. Kelsey reached her side and hissed, "Do you want me to call security? What's going on here?" Rosa lifted a hand, without looking away from the man. "Don't touch him," she said, and her voice came out different, stronger, filled with something fierce and shaking. The man nodded, like he agreed she had every right to call the cops, to scream, to throw him out. "My name is Ethan Cole," he said, in a voice that sounded like he was giving a confession more than an introduction. "I left Houston a year after that night. I went to rehab. My dad made me get help, but I never told him what I really did. I got sober. I built a company in Austin. Everybody thinks I'm this success story, the kid who turned his life around. But every raise, every deal, felt like blood money, because I knew I broke someone and ran away. I tried to find you. I kept checking news sites, old police reports. I found a short article about a young woman hit in a hit and run, but no name. I kept it in my wallet." With trembling hands, still on his knees, he dug in his back pocket and held up a worn, folded paper. "I came to Houston this week to open a new office. I stopped here for some groceries because I was hungry, that's all. And then I saw you walk," he said, his voice cracking, "and I knew that pain. I knew it because I put it there." The paper in his hand was yellow at the edges, the ink faded, but Rosa could make out enough as he held it up, arms shaking. There was the date. There were the words, "Young woman, late night hit and run, police seeking driver." Her own broken night, cut down to a few cold lines. The anger that had slept inside her for years woke up with a roar so loud she almost staggered. "You just went on with your life," she said, her voice rising now, not caring who heard, not caring that a crowd had gathered, phones out, eyes huge. "You became rich. You got sober. You got a company. While I lost my legs and my dad and my dreams. And you just—" Her hands were shaking so hard she had to set the scanner down. Ethan flinched at every word, like each one was a slap, but he didn't try to defend himself. Did not say he was young or scared or that it was a mistake. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he whispered. "I came this close to driving out of this parking lot when I recognized you, but I couldn't run again, not twice. I don't want to put my hands on you without your say-so. I don't want to make this any worse, but if you tell me to, I'll walk right now to the police station across the street and finally tell them what I did. I'll sign whatever. I'll give you every dollar I own. I don't care what happens to me. I only care that you finally know my name and that I'm not a ghost anymore." His voice broke on that last word, and for a strange second, Rosa saw not the rich man, not the driver, but a kid on a wet street, shaking and stupid and terrified, making the worst choice of his life in one selfish heartbeat. Her chest hurt. Her dad's face flashed before her eyes, then her son's Luis, 16 now, tall and skinny and full of his own wild edges. One bad night away from ruin, if he ever got with the wrong crowd. Rosa sucked in a breath that scraped her throat raw and forced herself to stand taller, even as pain burned down her right side. She was not the girl in the street anymore. She was a woman who had raised a son, buried a father, worked 3 jobs on legs that screamed, and still found ways to laugh with customers and fold laundry and cook beans and rice on Sundays. If this man thought falling to his knees and crying would right over all of that, he was wrong. "Get up," she said, her voice low but firm. "Not because you deserve to stand, but because I'm not going to let you make a show of your guilt in my checkout lane." He blinked, shocked, and slowly pushed himself to his feet, still shaking. The crowd shifted, disappointed that the drama seemed to fade, but they did not leave. They hovered, drawn to pain like always. Rosa turned to Kelsey. "I need to go to the office," she said. "You can close this lane. Put someone else here." Kelsey, eyes wide, just nodded and flipped the light above the register to red. Rosa looked back at Ethan Mew. She said, "Walk with me." He hesitated, then nodded, like a man walking toward his own trial. As they moved toward the small gray office at the end of the checkout row, Rosa's limp felt heavier than ever, each step a beat of old anger. But she also felt something else, steel, maybe, or fire. In the office, with the door shut on the noise of the store, The space felt too small for what sat between them. "Sit," she said, and he did, in a plastic chair that creaked under his weight. She stayed standing, leaning against the desk, because sitting down took too long and hurt too much. "You want to know what you did to me?" she asked. "Not just my legs. Let me tell you." She told him then, her words slow and clear, not letting him look away. She told him how she had watched her nursing dreams sink under hospital bills, how her friends had gone on to careers and marriages, while she learned how to walk again from a bed by the window. She told him about her dad working himself into a grave because the insurance company had called her case complicated and low priority. She told him how every job application after that came with a quick look at her limp and a slow, polite, "We'll call you," that never turned into a call. She told him how she picked up a name tag at Pricetown and smiled for customers who rolled their eyes when she did not move fast enough. She told him about Luis, the baby she hadn't planned, who'd grown up watching his mom limp from the bus stop, doing homework at the break room table while she worked late shifts. Her voice rose and fell, and sometimes she had to pause, because the weight of all those years pressed against her chest like a hand. Ethan listened without speaking, his face pale and lined, tears sliding down without shame this time, because shame was too small a word for what he felt. "Every step I take," Rosa said finally, tapping her thigh where the rod ran down the bone, "I remember. Your one night drunk is my forever." Ethan put his face in his hands for a long moment, then looked up, eyes red. "I don't know how to make that right," he said. "I don't think I can, but I can stop hiding. I can go to the police. I can give you money for surgeries, therapy, whatever you need. I started a foundation a few years ago for drunk driving victims, because I couldn't live with what I did, even to a stranger. I didn't know it was you, but it was still for you. It's not enough. It's nothing, really, but it's something I can put in your hands if you let me." His voice shook, but there was no dodging in his eyes now, no excuses. "You said you'd go to the police," she said. "You still will, even if there's no cameras on you, even if I walk out of here and say nothing." He nodded so fast, his neck looked like it hurt. "Yes," he said. "I'm tired of running from that night." Rosa pulled her small old phone from her apron, her fingers steady now. "Then we start there," she said, and in front of him she dialed the police station across the street, told the woman on the line her name, the date, the street, and that the driver who hit her was sitting in her office, ready to talk. Ethan watched her, both hands wrapped around the edges of his chair like he might float away if he didn't hold on. When she hung up, they sat in a heavy silence. The law was slow and messy, and when the officers came and the reports were pulled, it turned out the statute of limitations for some charges had passed, and the case had gone cold so long ago that pieces were missing. There would be no big courtroom scene, no judge banging a gavel, no jail cell door slamming shut just for her. That truth cut deep, but Rosa had learned long ago that the world did not hand out clean, perfect justice wrapped in bows. Still, Ethan signed every paper the officers brought, adding his full confession to the dusty old file, making sure his name was there in black ink next to the words driver and responsible. After the police left the office, Ethan turned to her again. "Whatever they can't do, I can try to do with my life," he said quietly, "if you'll let me. I can pay for the surgery your doctor once told you might help your hip. I can set up a trust for your son, for college. I can fund a scholarship in your dad's name at the college where you wanted to study nursing. I can stand with you at schools and tell kids what I did so they don't become me." The word blood money flickered in her mind, bitter and sharp. "Money doesn't fix everything," she said. "It doesn't make my dad come back." "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know it doesn't buy your forgiveness. I'm not asking for that. I can't undo the road you had to walk, but maybe I can help someone else not get pushed onto it." Days turned into weeks. and word about the scene at Pricetown moved through the neighborhood the way stories do, bending in small places, but carrying one clear core. The man who had broken her had come back and owned what he did. Rosa found herself sitting in a clean office at a downtown hospital one afternoon, listening to a new doctor explain the surgery they could now try on her hip. Surgery she had turned down years before because it might help but was very expensive. This time she did not have to pick between walking with less pain and paying rent. Ethan had wired the money straight to the hospital after her mama and Luis argued in the kitchen and finally agreed it was not dirty to accept what was owed. At the same time, papers were signed for the Miguel Martinez Nursing Scholarship, named after her dad, funded for years to come. The first time she saw the name printed on that simple flyer, something warm pushed against the cold place in her chest. At Luce's high school, they held a special assembly about drunk driving, and Rosa almost said no when Ethan asked if she would stand on stage beside him. The thought of sharing space with the man who had made her life so hard was like touching a scar that still hurt. But then she saw Luce's face when the principal asked her. Pride and fear mixed in his dark eyes, and she thought of all the boys who thought they were invincible on Friday nights. So she agreed, on the stage, under bright gym lights. Ethan told the packed bleachers how he had drunk too much, how he had hit a young woman and driven away. His voice shook, and his hands did too, but he did not soften the truth. When he said, "She is here today. She is the reason I'm still trying to be a better man," he looked at Rosa, not the crowd. The kids turned to her, seeing not just a tired store clerk, not just a limp, but a person whose pain had a name. After the assembly, a group of teenagers came up to her, some with tears, some with guilty faces, and one girl said, "I was going to get in a car last weekend with someone who'd been drinking. I'm not doing that again. I promise." Months later, Rosa stood at her register again. The beeps and bright lights of Pricetown, as familiar as ever, but her walk a little different. The surgery and therapy had not worked magic. She still limped, still had days when the pain clawed up her back. But there were mornings now when she made it to the bus stop without having to stop and gasp. There were nights when she could stand long enough to cook with Luis without leaning on the counter. And there was a scholarship check pinned to the fridge with her dad's name on it, waiting for some other kid with a dream of nursing and not enough money. On a slow Tuesday, as the lights slanted in through the big front windows, Ethan walked into her lane again. He wasn't wearing the gray hoodie this time. He had on a plain blue t-shirt and jeans, nothing that shouted rich. Just a man with a paper bag of groceries and a careful smile. Luis was bagging that day, earbuds tucked around his neck, and he straightened when he saw Ethan. His jaw set in the protective way of a son who had seen his mother cry in the dark. "You good, Ma?" he asked, glancing between them. "I'm good," Rosa said, and she meant it more than she would have thought possible that day in the office. Ethan set his items down. "How's the hip?" he asked gently. She rolled her eyes a little. "Still mine," she said. "Still stubborn, but better." He smiled, relief flickering across his face. Behind him, a woman in line watched Rosa's careful steps and frowned, her mouth opening like she was about to ask the same blunt question he had once asked. Ethan turned slightly, caught the look, and shook his head with a small, kind smile. "Some roads are rough," he told the woman. "Best thing we can do is be gentle with the people who had to walk them." Rosa met his eyes, seeing the kneeling man he had been, the broken boy at the wheel, and the man now trying every day to carry what he had done without letting it crush him or anyone else. She did not forget. She did not pretend it was all fine. But in that bright, ordinary aisle, she felt something she had not felt in a long time, a lightness in the space where anger had lived. She handed him his receipt, their fingers brushing for a second, not in hate this time but in a strange, hard-won peace, and as he walked away, she knew one thing, clear as the Texas sky. Never judge how someone walks until you know the road that hurt their feet.